My name is Raymond Santana, and I spent almost 7 years in prison for a crime I didn't do. Well, I was 14 years old at the time, and it was basically a typical school day. Usually we walked around in East Harlem and visit different neighborhoods, and it just so happened that this night, hanging out with them led me to be in the park. This was a large group, so you're talking 30-something kids. We got arrested that night, and we were given disappearance tickets to go to family court. So this wasn't nothing that was, that caused a major alarm. And at 1 in the morning, they found this woman, and then that's when this case became very serious. The 5 of us became the most vulnerable of the group. First off, you have to look at the situation. This was an investment jogger who was found that she wasn't supposed to make it. And so it became almost like a homicide issue. And so they brought in, the elite of the police department. This was the Homicide North Detective Squad. These are guys that have over 20 years on the force. These are veterans. And here you have these 5 or 6 kids who really had no issues with the law, very naive, very young. When you look at that situation and then you apply pressure to it, it becomes a disaster at the end of the day. We were interrogated from 15 to 30 hours. And even that becomes a surprise, that we even lasted that long under that amount of pressure. It's hard because, for me, that becomes like one big, not a blur, but it becomes like this long process. I can't tell you when it started. I can't tell you when it ended. All I can tell you is that I went through it. The officers, at first, they're friendly. They talk to you, hey, Raymond, we just want to know what happened that night. And you tell them what you believe, to be the facts. And they say, well, that's all right, but we know there's more. You're saying, well, what do you mean there's more? And then they have you go over the story, the scenario, several times. And they wasn't getting what they wanted. As time goes on, they become a little more hostile. My grandmother was there, but my grandmother speaks very little English. And they understood that. So what they would do is they would play on that. They would pull my grandmother out, and the first time, they took her into a hallway. It was a Spanish-speaking detective. And he has in the hallway, he's talking to her in Spanish because he's basically telling her, look, we think your grandson isn't giving us all the information. We want to help. We want to make sure everything goes right. And she's out there nodding her head. And while she's out there, they're in the room. The first time, they bring in this tall officer, and he comes in, and he gives me the meanest look. And now, I'm 14 years old. I'm maybe about 130 pounds. This guy's towering. He's over 6 feet. He's a big guy, and he gives me this look. I thought he was going to hurt me because the look he gave me, and then he said something. Is this the scumbag that did it? And they're like, yeah, well, he didn't tell us everything. He's playing hardball. And I'm sitting there saying, I'm not playing anything. I just told you what I know, and that's it. Then you go through several hours of more questioning. Who you was with, who you was there with, who you came with, what happened, what did you see, what did you take part in? And it's the same response. Then it gets to the woman. Well, we know that something happened, and we know you know, and I'm like, no, I don't know anything. Another officer comes in. He's a short guy, but he's very loud. And this time he pulls up a chair next to me, and starts yelling in my ear. I know you did it. You did it, right? You did it. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. And at the same time, the lead detective who's questioning me, he starts to yell at me. And so this is the time where it gets a little, for me. And I'm like, what's going on? I don't, I'm crying, And right at that moment, is a detective who was sitting in the back room. I don't know when he got in. I don't know when. He just appeared out of nowhere. And he stops him. And he says, get out the room. Kicks him out the room, And right then and there is the point that broke me down. Because here was, I felt like this guy saved my life. He saved me from being harmed. And so he pulls up a chair and he starts talking to me. Now he comes on like a father figure. Raymond, I know you didn't do it, and you're a good kid, but I need help. These kids are in the precincts, they saying you did it. Gotta help me here. And I'm sitting there saying, but I don't know what happened. I don't know. I was never there with this woman. Well, you gotta give me something. You gotta help me so you can go home. And those are the words that rung. Go home. He's trying to help me to go home. He pulls out this picture of Kevin Richardson. He puts it on the table. He says, do you know him? Excuse me. And I say, no, I don't know him, because I really didn't. And he says, well, this is Kevin. See that scratch under his eye? That came from the woman. We know he did it. He's going to jail. I don't want you to go to jail. So I need you to help me, Raymond. I need you to give me something on him. And at that point, you know, is when it starts to formulate. They basically conditioning me with a story. And I say, well, you know what? I saw him do it. You saw him do what? And I said, well, I saw him struggling with her. And he says, okay, but what else? He said, well, what about you, Raymond? What did you do? And I said, well, I didn't do anything. I saw what happened. And he said, Ray, you know, we got to make the story more believable. People just don't believe it if you just say you saw it. You know, you have to be like right there, you know. And he said, you got to give me something that makes you creditable to say that, you know, you was actually. So I said, yeah. I said, well, in the process, I reached down and I grabbed her breast. And then he said, look, I need you to do one more thing for me. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he said, I need you to go to another precinct, tell them the same story you told me, and you're going to do a videotape, and you'll be fine. For me, I felt relieved. The person had just came off of me. You know, now, here I was in a situation where I was helping. When you're under that amount of pressure, it doesn't matter how you get out. You just want to get from under it. You know, I mean, yeah, I was telling a false story, but I felt like at that point, it just had to happen. You know, they'll sort it out later on. They'll go back and look at it and say, this story is, you know, full of it. You know, they'll fix it. But I just had to, for that moment, and right in that time and space, I had to stop the pressure. It was like a roller coaster. You know, there was times where you feel that you're gonna beat the case and you know, the only evidence they had was our videotape statements. They took handprints, they took footprints, you know, they took all of our clothes, they took hair samples, blood samples, they did everything. And everything came back, nothing was a match. So the only thing they basically had was us in a statement. You know, you're thinking like, what's going on? Why isn't that nobody's seeing that these statements have inconsistencies? But it seemed like everybody bypassed it, you know, all because of what the media did to us. They gave us these labels, you know, wolf pack, rapists, urban terrorists, and all these politicians spoke out about us. You know, with that, we knew that we wasn't gonna win this case. And so even our lawyers tried to get a plea bargain, but we refused the plea bargain, you know.
Because why?
Because at the end of the day, you know, we didn't do it. And that's all we had left. Some of the most traumatic stuff that happened was I lost my mom when I was in prison. You know, at 19, she passed away from cancer. And then, you know, there was just that feeling. For a 14, 15-year-old kid to go through that experience, it seems like it's gonna never end. You know, to get there in 1990 and for them to say, well, your first parole board appearance is April of 1994, and that felt like forever. I was released in December of 1995. I came back with this aggression, you know, from prison. You know, I loved to stay in my room because my room was the size of a cell. I would eat my food very fast. I would stand in a crowded room and I would watch everybody moving. I would get up and go out early in the morning, take these long walks and just try to soak in the scene, you know, because when you're in prison, you walk that yard and you walk, you know, in a circular motion. And so I would just take these long walks that would maybe last 20 minutes and then come back. Yeah.
But not in a circular motion.
Not in a circular motion. This one was like straight, because now I feel like I'm going somewhere, you know? Some of that stuff is very hard to let go. You know, when we got the exoneration, I came home, it felt like that boulder was finally lifted off my shoulders. And at that point, I was able to let some of that stuff go, you know, because now I can walk around and people would say, hey, congratulations. Or people would apologize, you know, for my neighborhood. And that was very, you know, heartfelt and it was very warming. And it's at that point that you say, well, you know what, maybe I got a chance. You know, you get people still look at you, you know, because our exoneration was like on page 15. It wasn't, you know, it didn't make the same type of headlines that the convictions made. And so people still wasn't sure, you know, there was, you know, some people to this day, you sit there and they'll say, they were exonerated? You know, you go, yeah, all charges dropped. And people say, no, I think they got off on a technicality. 10 times out of 10, you're not gonna get hired. And let's say that one person does hire you. That one person says, you know what, I'm gonna give you a shot. And you know, he said, well, what happened in your case? And you say, the Central Park jogger case. And he probably goes, wait a minute, I should have rethought about this one, you know? Family try to do what they can, but it's after a while, it becomes very hard. I felt like I had no other opportunity, no chance. There was no transitional programs for us. We never got to go to a halfway house. We never got any of those programs that would allow you to get out early. We never got any of that. We got sent to the worst prisons. You know, we had to go through sex offender programs. There was never no breaks, you know? And so this was a situation that even though we were released and we was out into society, we were given a social death. And it was at that point that I didn't care anymore. You know, I stopped caring about the label of the Central Park Five. It was just like, this is how I'm gonna go to my grave. Me hitting rock bottom at that point and not caring anymore, you know, is what led to me caring now. Back in 1989, we were 14, 15, 16 years old, and nobody wanted to invest in us. And so we felt that for these kids out here in the street, we would invest our time, our story into them. And if we can save one, then we did our job. When a child's initially arrested, somebody from one of these agencies should be there, professional. You know, because a lot of times they'll have you call the parents, the police will call the parents. Parents might come in, the parents might not even know their rights. Parent might not know what a reminder is. You know, parent might not know, you know, tell the kid stop talking. You know, in Antron McCrae's case, you know, his father, the police were able to bring his father outside, talk to his father, and his father also became like an interrogator, you know, against them. Trying, just tell them what they want to hear. Just tell them what they want to hear. It should be a professional that should be there who knows the kid's rights, you know, who knows what should be done and what shouldn't be done, who can give the kid some sound advice on what he should do. People always ask, how can somebody confess? You know, and that's a real big misconception that people think that if it's me, I wouldn't do that. You know, I know better than that. And we always tell them, if you haven't been through a situation like that, you don't know. If you're driving your car and the police pull you over, automatically your heart starts to beat. Why are they pulling me over? What did I do? What's the problem? And so imagine if they take you to the precinct, they're putting you in a room, and you're sitting there for over 30 hours with no food, no drink, no water, no sleep. It changes dramatically. I love everything about being a father. You know, I mean, I went through this long time period of saying I won't have kids. You know, it wasn't in my plans because I had this big case and this big system that wouldn't let me survive. And I always thought that, you know, I would always go back and forth to jail. That would be my life. You know, if somebody would have told me 15 years ago that we would be exonerated, we would have a film, and I would be a father, I would have laughed at them. Fatherhood is great, you know, for me at this, right now. You know, I don't know how it's gonna be when she turns 15 or 16. You know?